E POU IERIKI oi, toki nā maia e ka kikurumu o POU IERIKI e kai e kero. E POU IERIKI oi, toki nā maia e ka kikurumu o POU IERIKI e kai e kero. E POU IERIKI oi, toki nā maia e ka kikurumu o POU IERIKI e kai e kero. E POU IERIKI oi, toki nā maia e ka kikurumu o POU IERIKI e kai e kero.
Pokorong taring, pokorong taring. He re mei ta imi, he re mei te motu, he re mei ka rangata matua, ka chakat, ka chimerik, ka mokopu, he re mei ko IERIKI. O tēnei tī o POU IERIKI, kohi mai rā I ka karakī o ka karāpuna moriori o re kohu. Ka rahi te mihi ki kota katoa, no tata, no te whietu, no te ao nui, te ao roa, te ao marama, hoko menetai, mēru. Tēnā koutou. O Kiwa Hammond, ta ingo o tēnā tī chakat. Ka mihi ki koutou. Good evening, everybody. My name is Kiwa Hammond. I will be your presenter for tonight and during this series named POU IERIKI. This webinar series, POU IERIKI, has been created to introduce, explain, and demonstrate the everyday use of some karakī moriori for those who are learning tare moriori language, and are interested in tikane moriori culture. These karakī have been sourced from the writings of our recorders and record keepers of the past, of moriori traditions that are now being brought to life verbally through recitation and discussion, to further our understanding of our karapuna moriori, and to consider how we can properly apply them in the present and in the future. We would like to thank Te Mātāwai for its investment in the regeneration of tare moriori, as well as its ongoing support for moriori language aspirations. The name of this series, POU IERIKI, is derived from an ancient canoe hauling chant. You would have heard it being recited as the opening track for this webinar series. In an earlier series of webinars produced in 2021-2022, POU IERIKI was explained and taught to the participants. And in fact, in the chat is a link to those webinars if you haven't had the opportunity to have a look at those. Here, in POU IERIKI, the POU represents a pillar, and IERIKI symbolizes leadership, because it takes great strength to take a stand and lead in the face of adversity, and to do so with peace in your heart. Ko hi mai rā I POU IERIKI. In this session, we are focusing on a karakī called Ko Tch Awhengā. Please watch the following video and listen to this karakī being recited and explanations that follow, along with some practical uses of phrases contained in this karakī.
I awhia mauri o rangata ki te whaiau ki tau marama. Te hoi a ta manu ka rereri pō. Ti he mauri ora ki te whaiau ki tau marama. Te hoi a ta manu ka rereri pō. Te mauri no tūri pō. In our creation stories, in the story of Rangi Tokona, there is a sequence of karakī. And in that sequence is the karakī Tch Awhengā. It's a short one, but it's quite an important one, because within it is mentioned the breath of life. Tihe mauri ora. And that talks about the process that Rangi Tokona went through in order to bring forth the entity known as Tu, and how the elements were called on, trees, birds, and through a combination of efforts, Tu was formed from the earth. So when we say tihe mauri ora, it's talking about life, life as we know it. Because Rangi Tokona created the space. Te Ao Marama filled the space. And by filling the space, was able to provide the conditions within which Tu could be formed and raised from the earth and from all these things that were around, all these elements around, to be not just etu on that level, but to provide a blueprint for life, and a blueprint later on for human life as we have evolved and as we have transformed through time.
So that's a recording of Ko Tch Awhengā being recited at Kopinga Marae on Rekohu. And obviously that was me a few kilograms ago. But the most important thing was being in a place, in a space to be able to do that karakī in a place that has meaning and connects to the karapuna. So let's have a look at Ko Tch Awhengā and what it's about. On your screen, you'll see there is an interpretation along with the words of this karakī. So, I awhia mauri o rangata ki te whaiau ki te ao marama, te hoia ta manu ka rereri pō. An interpretation of that is the essence of humanity was gathered into the world of existence, and light and a breath whirling like a current placed in the body of a flying bird. Te he mauri ora ki te whaiau ki te ao marama, te hoia ta manu ka rereri pō, te mauri no tūri pō. Sneeze the life essence to the world of existence, and light a swirling current of breath in the bird in flight, the life essence to a swirling current of life. An English interpretation is never going to do justice to the actual wording. And this is part of our journey of discovery with Tare e Moriori. And as we go deeper and we're trying to find out more about how our karapuna thought, and also how they spoke and how they expressed themselves. We can trace the origins of this karakī to our Moriori creation stories. And as was said in the video, in particular, the events following not so much the separation of sky and earth, but more so the creation of space. And in the creation of space into which light could enter. In the karakī known as Ko Rangi Tokona, That karakī speaks of how a sentient being named Rangi Tokana emerged from the energy created by Rangi Nui, the sky, and Papa Tuanuk, the earth. It is said that Rangi Tokana compels Rangi Nui and Papa Tuanuk to separate by building a pillar of stone comprised of 10 parts. Starting from the ground, as each segment of the pillar was laid upon the last, it gently elevated the Rangi Nui upward. This is known as POU o Rangi Tokana, the pillars of Rangi Tokana. And for those who have been to Kopinga, our marae on Rekohu, the pillar that stands in the middle of the whare is POU o Rangi Tokana. During that time, Rangi Tokana was joined by another entity that had formed from the energy of this action, Te Ao Marama. And together they made the physical creation of space between Rangi Nui and Papa Tuanuk, made it complete, but ensured they remained connected through POU o Rangi Tokana. As Te Ao Marama flooded the space between Rangi Nui and Papa Tuanuk with light that would encourage growth, Rangi Tokana began heaping up sand into a pile from which would emerge a new sentient being, Tu. This karakī, Ko Tch Awhengā, signifies the moment when Tu emerged from the soil, was born into this world. So who is Tu? In other indigenous traditions throughout the Pacific, Tu has several manifestations. Among Māori, for those of us of Māori descent, we know of Tu as Tu Matawhenga, who is regarded as the atua of warfare and appears in many forms that express excitement, fear, anger, conflict, as well as strength, resilience, protection, and leadership. In Hawaiian traditions, we hear about Ku, who also takes many forms regarding war, politics, farming, fishing, forest, rain, and more. To the Hawaiians, Ku is one of the 4 great akua, along with Kanaloa, Tāne, and Lono. Of course, those names sound very familiar if we were to replace those Ks with other letters. In Moriori traditions, the original manifestation of Tu represents upward growth and strength in all living creatures, including rangata, jacket, people, and fish, and many more. Tua karapuna, Tu was sometimes referred to as Tu matariri, the angry face of Tu, which human beings, we demonstrate through conflict and warfare. What is very interesting about Tu, from a Moriori perspective, was that our karapuna acknowledged that while Tu did develop warlike characteristics that resulted in death over many generations, Moriori, as we know, as a people chose to elevate Tu above being a mere harbinger of destruction, and to be regarded instead as a key figure who personified growth and development in the natural world. So let us listen again to this karakī, and what we'll do is that we'll have a discussion around ki tukupa, words that will help us to understand the significance of this karakī, and also help us to understand how we might be able to utilize this today and in the future.
I awhia mauri o rangata ki te whai au ki tau marama, te hoi a ta manu ka rereri pō. Ti he mauri ora ki te whai o ki ta marama. Te hoi a ta manuka rereri pō. Ta mauri no tūri pō.
Tēnā tātou. I can see a lot of familiar faces and some familiar names on the screen. A few of you who have actually chosen to show your faces. Others, I presume, are probably in the middle of dinner or maybe doing something else in the meantime. That's okay. Pakina, pakina, that's good. Do what you need to do for our hūnau. But what we thought we'd do is just have a little bit of discussion about this karakī, when might we use it? And I'll probably just preface it with a conversation I had with one of our hūnau members just recently. One of the questions I often get asked is, what's our pepeha? Now, that's a really interesting question. It's an interesting question because as Māori, and of course, many of us are on here, we are Māori as well as being moriori and a whole lot of other things. Pepeha is actually something which is uniquely Māori. And while this is just my humble opinion, while it is a useful framework to work from, it is something that came kind of from somewhere else. So I'm of the school of thought that actually we need to really actively get into understanding more about moriori language and through our karakī to understand how we can use these things, not so much to replace something like pepeha, but to be able to help us connect more strongly with our karaopuna. So one of our hūnau members was actually telling me recently that her mokopuna, or her mokopu, I should say, asked the same kind of question because of where this mokopu is being schooled. And of course, that's one of the questions that's been asked is, what's your pepeha? But this mokopu was raised on reko. And so really wanted to have something that is uniquely moriori. And so this hūnau member actually said, here, use this karakī, use Ko Tch Awhengā. And so this mokopu has been given this as a means to be able to demonstrate through the karakī that he is moriori, but also it's one that connects back to our origin stories. When I say stories, these aren't myths. Yeah, these are our narratives. These are our ancestral narratives. But anyway, that's just something to help preface our conversation. Just want to see if anybody has any questions or anything they'd like to share. If you don't want to come on screen, please feel free to use the chat function. And Rahiri Makini, and Rahiri Makini is actually my daughter, and she is the one who was managing any questions and things that are online. Okay, so over to you. Who'd like to start? Because if you don't start, I'll start doing karaoke, and you don't want that.
What you going to say?
There's a partai in the chat, Papa.
Okay. So a question that we have. What context was this karakī traditionally used in? Well, if I take it to I guess if you look at what it's about, Te He Moriora. Te He Moriora is is not just a Māori expression, but you can see in this karakī that it is a Moriori expression as well. And it is one of these, is a karakī that can be actually used to help our shimariki, our children, and our mokupu to understand Moriori worldview. Moriori worldview in terms of how our karapuna saw the world. And as I said before, there's a real stark contrast. So as Māori, for example, we talk about te wehinga. Te wehinga o rangi nui rawa ko papa tuanuku. This, however, is a Moriori telling of these origin traditions is quite different. We still have rangi nui, we still have papa tuanuku, but the role of two is very different. And like I said before, it's one of those things, I guess our karapuna, it's one of the reasons why, though this series is called POU, IERIKI, it is part of a project that we've called Hokorong Taring. And Hokorong Taring, does anyone remember what Hokorong Taring is? Those of you who came to those webinars back in 2021, 2022, I'm going to give you a clue. Hokorong Taring. It means to listen with your ears. You know, Māori, we say taringa whakarongo. Moriori, hokorong taring. And if you've never said that before, now's a great opportunity just to try. And actually grab yourself by the ear and go, hokorong taring. Hokorong taring. Okay, hokorong taring. So this is your taring, this thing here. Of course, hokorong is a Moriori way of saying listen. But it's more than just saying, you know, listen up, kids, I've got something to say. Hokorong taring was actually with our karapuna, them telling the stories of where we came from, and actually as a reminder that our karapuna actually came from a very violent past. You know, let's not be mistaken about that. Especially in the islands, in Hihiawaiki. If you've not heard that term before, you know, you might want to say it to yourself, Hihiawaiki. Right? Hihiawaiki, which is a Moriori way of saying Hawaii. Our karapuna did use the term Hawaii as well. And Hokorong Taring is when it talks about that time when actually our karapuna, they were just being human beings. They were just doing things that humans had done for a long time and are still doing to each other now. Wars, conflicts, and so on. So Hokorong Taring, we're actually like a series of stories, of narratives about our karapuna. And I think our karapuna, let's say that as they evolved, as they transformed into a people who were dedicated to rongo, to peace, the covenant of peace that was set down by Nuku Whenua, where he said, koro patu, koro kai tangata, e tapu toaki. Lay down your arms and cease the consumption of human flesh, for it's sacred. When he laid down those terms, and the people took it on, the covenant of peace, and we know that for hundreds of years they lived by that. Doesn't mean they didn't have their conflicts though. And I guess that's where two comes in. When you talk about context of, you know, when was it used? How was it used? And so two remains a constant in the hokopapa of Moriori. And as a reminder that two and rongo they actually coexist. You can't have one without the other. So I hope that answers your question there, Ches Taurima, because I know you're the one who asked that question. Good question, Alicia, good statement there. Mahara. Tēnā ko mahara. Thank you. I was just about to ask whether this karakī can be used as an opening to a hui. Yes, 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 it can. And actually, a moriori way of saying yes is ooh, 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 ooh. There's a story behind it. So it's like an affirmation, a sound of affirmation. So yes, you can. You can use this karakī to begin a hui. You can use this karakī if you are standing to speak, i.e. in a mihi type situation. And it's really interesting. I've noticed that whenever I've stood and I've started a kōrero with this particular karakī, especially among mātanga reo Māori who know me, and then I start off with this karakī, ia whia mauri o rangataki, te whai o ta marama, oi a te manu ka rereri pō. And you see them go, huh? What? I've seen people physically checking their ears, going, what? Am I hearing properly? What? Because even to the ears of a mātanga reo Māori, it is quite unique, it's different. And so it will definitely get people's attention. I can guarantee that. It will definitely get their attention. And it's one of those things where when you use it, you're actually making a statement. You're making a statement about being moriori. Some people might come and go, what was that language you were saying? It wasn't Māori. It wasn't, Samoan. It wasn't, anything. What was that? And so I've actually found that when I've used this karakī, because it's quite short, and it's quite simple, and it's effective, and you take your time. I think that's the really important thing with our karakī moriori. Take your time. Say it slowly and say it deliberately. I've got I don't know if you guys can see the backdrop behind me. It's this is the kopi grove at Rotorua on the island. And if you can imagine, this is what I do, is that when I am reciting any karakī, if I'm not on the rekohu, I imagine that I'm in a place like this. Because I think that's the other important thing about karakī. It's not just some words that you recite and make yourself sound flash. It's about connection. So in my mind, I close my eyes sometimes, and I actually I place myself mentally and spiritually in these places where I might not be able to do so physically. But of course, there is nothing like being on the island, being on rekohu, being in a place like in the kopi groves, and actually be able to just say these karakī to ourselves, and so the karapuna can hear, but not shout it. We don't need to shout, people. We're moriori. We're meant to be peaceful. So, right, are there any other questions? Gee, you're a quiet bunch. And that's okay. Just give me a moment, folks. I'm just going to go back to the karakī and put it back up on screen. So what we'll do actually is we'll go through it together, shall we? We'll go through it together. We'll go through a few times just so you can wrap your taring around my warero. 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 Thank you, Tiara, my niece. So we'll go through it together, and so you can wrap your taring around the warero and your warero around the karakī, and give you an opportunity to just to speak it. But please remember that these webinars will be available online, so you have the opportunity to go back and have a watch and have a listen, and look at Kiwa standing in his profile several kilograms ago, I'm hoping, and be able to take it in. Okay, so I'm going to put this back up on the screen. Oh, just give me one moment. Caller. Okay. And I'd like to say that I'm technically competent when it comes to working this kind of technology, but that's why I have my support team behind me to be able to make sure we get things right. So let's go through this together. So, karakī, Ko Tch Awhengā. Ko Tch Awhengā. And if you're having a problem, you're not quite sure about the TCH, ch, ch. Put your tongue behind your top row teeth, like this, and go ch. So it's not ch, like ch, ch, chakakam, 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 chakakam. Those of you from the 80s, you know, in the 90s, you know, you remember chakakam. Okay. So it's not chakakam, it's ch. Ko Tch Awhengā. Okay. So I'll speak it through the first line and just you repeat after me. You don't need to keep it on mute, Huno, or else we just have a cacophony of sounds, and just say it quietly to yourself or among yourselves, whoever's in the room with you. Okay. I awhia Māori o rangata. I awhia Māori o rangata. I awhia Māori o rangata. Ki te whaiau, ki te ao marama. Ki te whaiau, ki te ao marama. Ki te whaiau, ki te ao marama. Te oia, te manu, ka rereri pō. Te oia, te manu, ka rereri pō. So from the top, I awhia Māori o rangata. Ki te whaiau, ki te ao marama. Te oia, te manu, ka rereri pō. And again, I awhia Māori o rangata. Ki te whaiau, ki te ao marama. Te hoia te manu ka rereri pō. Ti he Māori ora te whaiau. Ti he Māori ora ki te whaiau. Ti he Māori ora ki te whaiau. Ki te ao marama. Te hoia te manu. Ki te ao marama. Te hoia te manu. Ki te ao marama. Te hoia te manu. Ka rereri pō te Māori no tūri pō. Ka rereri pō te Māori no tūri pō. Ka rereri pō te Māori no tūri pō. Ti he Māori ora ki te whaiau ki te ao marama. Te hoia te manu ka rereri pō te Māori no tūri pō. And we'll go all the way to the top. We'll say it together all the way through. I awhia Māori o rangata. Ki te whaiau ki te ao marama. Te hoia te manu ka rereri pō. Ti he Māori ora ki te whaiau ki te ao marama. Te hoia te manu ka rereri pō. Te Māori no tūri pō. And we'll do it one more time. Ia whia mauri o rangata ki te whaiau ki te ao marama, te hoia te manu ka rere ri pō. Ti he mauri ora ki te whaiau ki te ao marama, te hoia te manu ka rere ri pō, te mauri no tū ri pō. So you can see and you can hear that I am deliberately taking my time, being slow, and being careful to enunciate every word. And the reasons for that is that when you consider the environment, the karapuna, the world they lived in, the elements that they were exposed to, it had a strong influence on the way they spoke. And it's the same with people anywhere. Your environment does shape your language. Your environment does shape the way that you express yourself physically, spiritually, mentally, and verbally. So take your time. And you'll see that with words like hoia in particular. It's a funny looking, tukupu, that one, a funny looking word, because you can get yourself, you can get your warero all sort of twisted and tied up. Oia, oia, te oia te manu, te oia te manu. So take your time. And if you're wondering, why are there macrons in different places? This is a really interesting thing about our karapuna, because in Te Reo Māori in particular, we're very particular about the use of, or some are very particular about the use of macrons and short and long vowel sounds. Our karapuna were different. In fact, they often put emphasis on a word or on the vowels of a word simply to give it emphasis, not necessarily because of the meaning. So in Te Reo Māori, we know that sometimes where you place a vowel has a strong bearing on what the word actually means. Whereas our karapuna, I think they like to play with language. They like to play with sound. And so you will see, deliberately so, the word ripo at the end of each of those verses has a long vowel sound, but in the third line of the second stanza, it's ripo. So I think they like to play with language. And they were known to play games with words and kind of jumble them up and throw them around, and probably more for amusement than anything else. So our karapuna, though they were a deep and very spiritual people, I think they're also people who like to be able to give dramatic effect, especially in the use of karakī, but also I think they like to give effect just sometimes to have a little bit. So just on that note, Huno, have a bit of fun. Have a bit of fun with this. Though these are karakī, and they come from sacred places. Make sure that when we're doing these karakī, that if you're not in a place like the image behind me, that you're in a place that's you put yourself into a place and space, be that mentally, physically, spiritually, visually. Envision that place and then do your karakī. Okay, I'm just going to check and see if there were any other anything else in the chat there. Is it appropriate for non-Moriori to recite this, to whakamana, to whakanui, to acknowledge your beautiful language and the wairua of this you got karakī. Karakī, for example, when some of us students are asked to open a Te Reo Māori class, I am tauiwi, so I have no Māori whakapapa ngā mihi mō tau kōrero. Thank you, Tanya. And I hope I've said your name correctly, Tanya. It's a good question. I guess the question that I would put back, not just to you, but anyone who's thinking the same thing, because we love people who are there to support our language, be it te reo Māori or be it tare moriori. But we also ask that to be mindful of actually who are the right ones to be using these types of karakī. And I say this as somebody who is of Māori, Moriori, and European descent. An example is, if I was to go into another tribal area as Māori, it wouldn't be a good look for me to recite their karakia. In fact, they might actually be quite upset about it. But what I would bring is the karakia that from my area and from within my whakapapa in the schools of learning that I've been in, that complement what they do. So I would never presume to go into someone else's rohe and perform their karakia, even if I know them. There's certain times, there are times and places and also people to do these. But thank you. It's a really good question. I think it's a very pertinent question. So the only thing I would say is just be mindful that for Moriori, we are actually on the journey of rediscovering a language and our culture. And we are looking at, we need to equip ourselves. But thank you. We do, we acknowledge the tautoko, we acknowledge the support. But it's just one of those things to be mindful of. I think it's a case of support others to be able to do this in the first instance. And when I say others, I'm talking about Moriori descendants in particular. Okay. Right. Oh, yes, and a question here from Mahara. So we are saying che combined with ao. Yeah, they do kind of flow together, but che ao arama. Yeah, che ao. And che is one of the many ways that Moriori say da. You know, in te reo Māori, we have te and we have ngā. And we have some other forms, but they're quite, they're older forms. But in Moriori, wow, we've got about a dozen or so different ways of saying da. And some of them are quite different. But anyway, just for today, yeah, we're just going to, there's two there in particular. Actually, it's three. You'll see the word che, te, and ta. Three different ways of saying da. And there's reasons for it. And it usually has to do, with the word that follows. But that's not a hard, fast rule. Okay, and what I mean by the word that follows, if you look in that second verse, I'm just mindful of time, because we did say this would be 30 to 45 minutes, and I think we're hitting on the 45-minute mark now. But just before we finish, when you look at the second stanza, he mauri ora ki te whai au. Ta, whai. Reason why it's ta is because whai, that first vowel sound in there is a a. Now, that's a general rule. It's not a hard, fast rule. Anyway, if there are no more questions, who know? What we're going to do is actually we're going to bring this session to an end. I don't see hands up or anything like that. No. Sorry, just going through. But would just like to acknowledge everybody who's come on to, it's very short notice, and we do apologize. Iaroha me. If you want to know how to say sorry, and well, it's not really sorry, in Moriori, iaroha me. Apologies for the very short notice and getting this up. there's been a lot going on, but let's not get into it right now. So thank you all for joining us tonight. The next, well, actually, before we do it, emihi, acknowledgement to Hokotehi Moriori Trust and Kopinga Marae, Rekohu. Te Mātāwai, for the language revitalisation funding that they have been giving to Taimi Moriori and also to iwi Māori right around Aotearoa. Te Paipai Pūtai o te whare wānanga o tākou, who actually helped us with some of the filming in relation to another project, but they generously gave of their time to be able to provide some help to us. And we're not going to acknowledge ourselves, but we are RTS Solutions and Project Rangatahi. And in particular, just we have our webinar and tech support team, that's Rahi Markwini and Zach. So yeah, acknowledgements to those organisations and also acknowledgements to everybody who's joined us tonight. So what we're going to do, and some of you will recognise this is a karakī that we use, and it's a karakī that was talked about in the first webinar series. So once again, we encourage you to go back, go into the chat, click onto that link, and that will take you to the webinar series from a year or two, a couple of years ago. And there is some explanations in there about this particular karakī. And for those of you who know, we put some actions to this. So, okay, so tau mu wai rung, tau mu wai raro, tau mu wai roto, tau mu wai waho, haurongo, haurongo, hoko menetai, me rongo. So thank you once again, everybody. And the next webinar is actually tomorrow night. That's right. You get a double dose of me. Actually, you get a triple dose because we're doing another one on Thursday. Anyway, next webinar is tomorrow evening, and we're going to be looking at something called Hitime, which some of you already know, but we're going to have a bit of a kōrero about that one. Okay, so for those of you who are able to join us tomorrow night, same bat time, same bat channel, 7 p.m. New Zealand time. Apologies to our huno over on Rekohu. I know it's a little bit later, 7:45, but we promise that won't be 9 o'clock kind of thing. So once again, thank you. Ka rahi te mihi ki koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou hoko menetai, me rongo.